Today is Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, and I'm on as always with my partner Dominick, both of us coming from Long Island this evening. How are you, Dom?
Doing great, Mike. Made it back to New York and here with you as always.
Well, glad you made it back safely. So, what's happening? Anything new going on?
Hey, listen, we shouldn't laugh about this. I apologize for laughing about it, but we all went to bed on Friday, expecting that some kind of an event might happen over the weekend, and it surely did. So, why don't we spend a few minutes talking about, through Friday, and then obviously the weekend's actions and how they affected the market.
Yeah, and I look, I think none of it is funny other than things just change so quickly, and just when you think you have a handle, these are one of those black swan events that they're just not on anyone's bingo card. And I think the laughter was more out of frustration than anything else, Dom.
Yeah,
um,
and again, I'm not being defensive when I say this, Mike, but we always talk about headline risk, right? It's one of our favorite phrases. And what we mean by that is sometimes stuff comes out of nowhere, we don't know about it, and it surprises us. In this case, I don't know if it was a big surprise. And again, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty about this, but having the coalition of the U.S. and Israeli military attacking Iran was not entirely a surprise, Mike, but the markets clearly are affected. The global economy is clearly affected. So yeah, well, let's take a few minutes tonight and make sure we get our thoughts out there and hopefully maybe calm some people down.
so before we do that, let's do what we normally do and go over the numbers through Friday, which was the end of February. So we're 2 months into the year. Year to date, the S&P 500 is up 2/3%, so almost basically flat. The Nasdaq is actually down about 2.4% through Friday, and the Dow Jones actually was up about a little bit more than 2% through Friday. Now all those numbers are changed right now, and I don't have the most current numbers from tonight's close, but look, there are, I think, two sets of things going on, and one is the real tragedy of whether you want to call it a war, a conflict, whatever you want to call it. Lives are at risk, bombs are dropping, people are dying, and all that is very serious stuff and happening in real time. I think the headline risk, Dominic, is how long is it going to last? What's going to happen to the price of oil? What's going to happen to the straits that a lot of oil passes through? So I think the market is really nervous, not about what we know, but worried about what we don't know yet.
Yeah, great point, Mike. So, looking at Friday's numbers that you rattled off, the markets, the general markets were not having a great year,
Mhm.
particularly because technology, which has led us the last couple of years, is really kind of faltering. All the big names that you just have to own, the Magnificent Seven just haven't really been all that magnificent on a
Mhm.
year-to-date basis. So, if you were concentrated portfolio where these all the names that we all know and you own them all and you owned a heavy position in them, you're probably looking at a year-to-date number in a negative column, right? They have not performed well, and we won't spend a lot of time tonight on that. But the rest of the market, the other 493, as we've talked about for years, actually have been behaving well, and that's kind of what happened through. Friday continued to happen through Friday. Software companies, crypto, technology, AI companies, all way underperforming. In fact, software companies on the average are probably down what, like 20, 30% year to date,
Mhm.
with some players being down way, way worse than that. But
Mhm.
when we look at all that stuff, and then what happened over the weekend, the whole dynamics change. And the fact that we're at war, I don't care what they call it, Mike, we're at war. We're at war with a nation that produces a considerable amount of oil, and a considerable amount of the world's oil supplies goes through the Straits of Hormuz. This is significant on a global scale.
Yeah, and you're 100% accurate because before Saturday morning, the stuff that the market was worried about, like you pointed out, the AI run up, software as a service getting beat up, the GDP number wasn't that great, the Federal Reserve's new chief. Once bombs start dropping, Dom, it's always amazing to me. None of that matters anymore. None of it. All those stories take an immediate backseat, which is appropriate because now in real time, the all of the chairs have to be rearranged and people have to reassess risk literally in real time, right? Because what happens in tomorrow's morning headline will clearly affect their portfolio.
Yeah, so let's kind of lay it out, Mike, and then maybe I don't know if we're going to make anybody feel better about anything, but we mentioned oil, which is, basically obviously powers the entire global economy. And it being restricted for any significant period of time. And we should say out loud that we have a glut of it on a global platform, right? There's this right now, there literally is tons of tankers around the world with oil in them, and they'll get where they're supposed to go on a timely basis. So in the short run, we don't have a significant issue other than new oil being produced is priced at a higher price because we just don't know the risk yet. But then you got to add in, Mike, things like Dubai is, we don't think of it much here in the United States, but it is in terms of global travel. Dubai is a portal into Africa, into Southeast Asia, India. And if that's restricted, global travel slash commerce is restricted. People's ability to get around the world, people's ability to engage in commerce, in business, all that comes to potentially a screeching halt. So the short-term effect is that we could have significant economic decline, hopefully only for a short period of time.
And the other part of it, which I think is a little bit unspoken, except on maybe the major news networks, is now there's always the fear of Dominic. What does retaliation look like? And does retaliation reach our shores? Right? I mean, prior to 2001, we as a country never really felt any retaliation right here at home, and that's changed significantly in the last 25 years. So I also think that's also an undercurrent to the market. But so, what's your feeling about that?
Well, I want to say, we're already seeing the beginning of retaliation, right? Iran's military has been pretty much decimated. Leadership has been pretty much decimated. Having said that, they still have no problem lobbing over missiles, rockets, drones. So they're attacking their neighbors, which is kind of insane. But the whole thing is off script, right? But they're attacking the oil facilities, the natural gas facilities, the airports, the luxury hotels. They want their neighbors to feel the pain, hoping that they, in turn, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Emirates, will put pressure on the United States. They attacked a military base on Cyprus that belongs to the Brits, the UK, again, hoping that the UK, would put pressure on the United States. So they don't have very many ways to lash out, but whatever they can do, they're trying, right? They're kind of in a helpless position. They don't have the resources to really defend themselves. And so, what we worry about is a lone wolf event where there's a terrorist attack on our soil by a sleeper cell or something along those lines, where an American tourist overseas gets attacked by an individual. So there is fear, and there's reason for fear because some of this stuff may happen.
So, what do you make of the market the last 2 days, where yesterday the futures when we woke up were down 500. This morning when we woke up and the market opened, it was down 1,000, which again sounds like a giant number, but compared to the size of the market these days, it's a 2% decline. Not pleasant, but not disastrous. And by the end of the day, both days in a row, the market really recovered.
Um,
Today it closed down, but it got back half of the losses.
Yeah, it's funny because Mike, I just literally finished a phone call with a client who pointed out it seems like the market's really sloppy in the first half of the day, these last 2 days, and then sort of kind of recovers in the afternoon. And listen, I don't have any insight more than anybody else, but it seems to me you're getting a lot of individual investors that maybe are a little of I can't stand the pain, get me out. And they're the first ones to come into the market in the morning, just get me out at any price. And then maybe the professional investors going, yeah, you know what? If I can be patient, I can buy these companies at a pretty decent discount. And maybe more of the professional investor comes in the afternoon, and the sort of retail investor does the selling in the morning just because they already just can't deal with the pain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of logical. And also, I think as the news cycle evolves over the course of the day, that might affect investor sentiment as well, don't you think?
I think you're right on that one, Mike. Again, I think you're spot on. So this morning we had literally an announcement that came out of Iran that the Straits of Hormuz were closed, officially closed. Well,
Hmm.
okay, so anybody can make that kind of an announcement. And by this afternoon, our own president said, yeah, if we have to, we're going to literally escort every tanker in and out using our own military resources. And that kind of put the market's mind to ease. But yeah, the minute by minute headline is going to drive this market higher or lower.
So yesterday morning, we were invited to a call with J.P. Morgan Asset Management, and one of their lead geopolitical commentators was on. He spoke about 20 minutes. And look, the expectation now from the experts, way smarter than me, um, are anticipating this being a relatively short event. Again, whether you call it a war, whatever you want to call it, I agree with you. It's a war, but the hope, and I think the market is still banking on that. You know, this last 3 to 5 weeks, I think the fear, Dom, is we're both old enough to have heard this several times, and then you wind up in this quagmire where it takes not 3 to 5 weeks. It could take months or years, and
God forbid.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that would be the
Mike.
worst case.
And look, I want to say it out loud so that I'm going to pose you the question so you can say it out loud. But I think you would agree that even the declines we've had over the last 2 days, they've kind of been orderly, right? Clients don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that, markets are down 1,000 points. But on a Dow Jones that's at one point was up 50,000 to 50,000 year to date, 1,000 points is literally kind of nothing, 2%, right?
2%.
So it's kind of been orderly, right, Mike? Wouldn't you
Yeah,
say?
and look, Dom, it always makes me nervous when clients get complacent. I follow the volatility index pretty closely, but you know, they have not seen this chapter of the book, but they've read the book before, right? We've been through so many of these cycles in the last 10 years that they quickly recover, that I think the clients are just anticipating that this too shall pass.
And again, looking at this thing historically, Mike, eventually things do calm down, and
Mhm.
eventually markets do, seeing that perhaps the worst hasn't happened, then they work their way back higher, right? But we're still dealing with a lot of unknowns and a lot of possibilities. And I do think this too shall pass. But I don't think it's a day or two. It might be a week or two or three. But we will be living with some excess volatility for a little while longer.
So before we take a break and get to our guest, Peter Schwartz, let's talk about what we've done with our models. We got a letter out to our clients. So why don't we just spend a few minutes talking about some of the adjustments we made as we heard the news that battleships were heading towards Iran.
Yeah, so it's funny because I'm sure you've had the same conversation with your clients today. The ones I've had with my clients, like, you guys had a crystal ball, and I'm like, no, we don't have a crystal ball, not one that works. But last week, early in the week, we raised cash by 2.5% in our client portfolios. And then on Friday, once we learned that the Iranians had walked out of the negotiation that were going on with the U.S., we liquidated another 2.5% in some of our portfolios and raised cash in others. Look, we don't have a crystal ball when you see all these ships and military and planes and missiles all gathering in one spot, and the negotiations don't seem to be going well. I don't know, Mike. How about you? I don't think you need to be a brain surgeon to go, this may not go well. And just in anticipation and trying to be prudent, we have raised cash before the attack occurred. So again, we were fortunate in that we raised cash and tried to get a little bit defensive. Hindsight, you always want to do more, right? But at least we were preemptive in putting the portfolios in a place where we could have some excess cash to hopefully buy when the opportunity comes along.
Well, again, I would disagree a little bit in your defense by saying we're not market timers. So we weren't trying to time the market as much as we were trying to be proactive with what we simply saw.
And again, to your credit, Mike, because we spoke over the weekend, and what we were seeing says, hey, prior to the weekend actions, that this might go sour, and then more important, we do have a responsibility to be proactive, and we were fortunate that we were. And of course, we Sunday we sent the letter out to our clients going, "Hey guys, normally we wait for the week, we wait for this podcast to get our thoughts out to our clients and our friends and such. But we thought we should be very proactive to let clients know, hey guys, you may not notice because it's the weekend, but we were a little fortunate in our timing in with regard to putting some cash off to the side."
Let me ask you this. It just popped into my head. Look, if Trump is anything, he's a businessman in his heart. Do you think it's a coincidence that both the scooping up of what was it, Mondaro, whatever his name is in Venezuela, and this attack in Iran both happened Friday evening into Saturday morning to kind of let the markets absorb and digest this news? I don't think it's a coincidence.
I certainly can appreciate that you don't think it's a coincidence. I will say that there's a specific holiday in the Muslim world, and that maybe let them be a little bit off guard. And I think they were being very opportunistic about when they could take advantage of both scenarios, the one in Venezuela and the one in Iran. Hey, we have an opportunity. We may not have that opportunity tomorrow or again in the near future. So I honestly do believe they were very opportunistic about, hey, we got a chance. We got to take our shot. And I didn't mean that the way it came off. I apologize. But they saw an opportunity. They being the Israelis as well, right? Let's be honest, Mike. The Israeli intelligence is considered some of the best in the world, as is ours. They had knowledge of certain events. And this president does not, whether you like him or you don't, and this is not a popularity contest. This president does what he says he's going to do. So in our view, again, to last week prior to the invasion, we just looked at this armada in the Middle East of ships and then planes and soldiers and missiles and the aircraft carrier Ford coming into the theater, and like, this I don't know about you, but it just doesn't feel like it's going to be easy going, and maybe we should be a little bit careful. And again, fortunate that we were.
Yeah. Let's move on to, I don't know if it's our second favorite topic or our first favorite topic, but our guest this evening, the lighter side of what we've just been discussing, is Peter Schwartz. Some people may recognize the name. He's been the ESPN. I'm sorry, he's going to kill me. He's been the WFAN update guy and personality for many, many, many years. He's a host of the Sports Bash podcast. And again, we're gonna and other things, other local sporting events on Long Island. He's going to tell us about. So we're going to talk to Peter Schwartz. Take a little break for the rest of the show and just talk about his journey, which will help a lot of our younger listeners as they want to pursue what seems to be a glamorous career, and also talk about some of the more topical conversation topics in sports that are happening right now. So we'll be right back with Peter Schwartz from WFAN and host of the Sports Bash. All right, I'm Michael Hartzman, back with my partner Dominick and our guest this evening, Peter Schwartz, host of the Sports Bash and frequent contributor and sports update guy on WFAN. Good evening, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Thank you for having me on the show.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us, Pete.
So, Peter, Dominick and I get invited to a lot of meetings and we meet with a lot of financial professionals. And the next morning we turn on the TV and there they are on the floor of the exchange or CNBC or Fox Business. And we frequently refer to them as financial famous because no one knows who they are unless you watch the financial networks. And I'm going to refer to you as Long Island famous because you're in Newsday, you're on the radio, wherever I turn frequently, there you are. So welcome, and we're happy to have you on our podcast this evening.
Well, I appreciate that. You mentioned that you see me in Newsday. Sometimes it was good to be in Newsday, sometimes it wasn't so good to be in Newsday.
Fair enough. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your journey, right? Because everyone, we have a lot of young listeners, a lot of children and grandchildren of our clients. Everyone, either, as you said earlier, you want to play shortstop, for the New York Yankees, or you want to be the announcer. And being an announcer sounds like a great gig. It's not that easy. It's to get into. It's not that easy to be successful. So why don't we start there, kind of your journey as a local guy, and you've been successful enough to be on WFAN for years. Congratulations for that. But why don't we start there?
Well, I realized at a very young age that I wasn't any good to play, so I was not going to make it. I was not going to be the shortstop for the Yankees. I was not going to be the right winger for the Islanders. I was not going to jump center for the Knicks. That was never going to happen. But I did realize at a young age that I loved sports, And I remember watching a baseball game with my dad on TV, and I turned to my dad and said, I really think I would like to do this for a living. I'd like to, someday I'd like to be a sportscaster. And that was entrenched in me during a Little League game when I was playing first base and we're warming up before the game, and our starting pitcher is taking his warm-ups. And you know how the first baseman likes to throw the ball around the infield during warm-ups. Well, I went to go throw the ball to the third baseman, and I hit our starting pitcher in the pitching shoulder with my throw across the diamond and knocked him out of the game before it even started. So I realized right then and there that if I was going to be involved in sports, it was going to be talking about it. It was going to be writing about it. So I proceeded to focus on that. I went to college and majored in broadcasting at Buffalo State College, which is now Buffalo State University. And my first job out of college was with Sports Phone. You guys probably remember Sports Phone. That was your sports radio before it was really sports radio.
976-1313.
Oh,
Nice.
Mike, I don't believe it. I can't remember what I ate for lunch today. But I do know we used to dial in to get the most updated score, right?
Yeah.
There was no ESPN Live or Red Zone. You dialed the phone number and you got the latest score.
Yeah. So when I was a kid and the Yankees were playing on the West Coast, my parents wouldn't let me stay up late all the time to watch the Yankees if they were in Seattle or whatever. So first thing I would do when I wake up in the morning is go to the phone and dial 976-1313. And if the Yankees lost, I would dial back a second time just to make sure I heard the score correctly. And when my parents would get the phone bill, and they'll be like, "Why are you calling this 976 number all the time?" And somewhere down the road there, I wound up working for it. It was a really cool way to start my career, and it opened up the door for a lot of other opportunities, working for a local radio station here on Long Island, doing a weekly talk show, and some play-by-play assignments came out of it. But I got to cover games and network myself, and that's so important. And as you guys know, in any business, networking is so important. And I was just talking to a college student today, and talked to him about how important it is to get out there and cover games and meet people. And that's what I did. Even though I was working at Sports Phone, I spent a lot of time meeting people at games that I was covering, and it eventually opened up a door for WABC, and I started working there, and that led to ESPN and to what I'm doing today with the Fan and some other things. So it was a long journey. I don't regret any of it. It's a lot of fun. I could be selling shoes for a living, but I'm doing something that I'm passionate about. And the cool thing for me is that I get to do different things. I host a show. I do updates. I do play-by-play. I do PA. I do some writing. So I'm very, very fortunate that in my career of 36 years now, that I've been able to do a lot of things. And if you told me when I was 6 or 7 years old that I've get to cover the World Series and cover the Super Bowl and do this and talk to some of my favorite players, I would have said you're crazy. But I'm just grateful that I've had that opportunity.
Hey, Pete, just a somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but you think about sports in New York and you're talking to all these athletes and watching games. Why don't you tell us how glamorous and sexy the whole sports deal is, especially in New York?
Well, again, most sports fans, people who follow sports radio and read the newspaper, the last thing they want to do is hear me or any other sports reporter complain about long hours. Oh, you're getting paid to watch games. Yes, that's 100% true. But there's pros and cons to everything. Years ago when I was covering the Mets and Yankees on a regular basis for ESPN, and I would leave my house at 2:00 in the afternoon to go to a Yankee game. To get into the locker room at 3:30 when they open up the locker room to talk to players pregame, and game starts at 7:00. You're lucky if the game ends at 10. You go to the locker room. By the time you do your work and file your reports, you're out of there at 11 and 11:30. I'm home by 1:00 in the morning. So, but people will say, well, you got paid to be at a baseball game. Yeah, but I was out of my house at 2:00 in the afternoon, and I got home at 1 and didn't get to see my wife before she went to go to sleep.
Come on, Pete, you worked half a day. Come on.
Well, a day-night doubleheader that starts at 1:00 and then has the night game at night. That's a pretty long day too. But again, I'm not complaining about it. But when people will say, well, it's all glorious. No, not all of it is glorious. There's a lot of challenges and there's a lot of hard work. And when you're a beat reporter, there's beating the other reporters to stories and things like that. If it's hosting a show or doing play-by-play for a game, there's prep time that goes into it. Some people think, like, you watch a game on television, the announcer's job starts when the ball is tipped up in the air or the first pitch is thrown. There's a lot of preparation that goes into, doing a game. So again, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining about it, because I'm not, because there's nothing else in the world I'd rather do than what I'm doing right now and working in sports. But the perception from people is that it's this big glorious thing that you get to do, and there's a lot about it that's not glorious.
So Peter, Dom and I, as you know, we own an investment company. We're financial guys. You're a little younger than us, but we're in the same age category, basically. So give us your honest opinion on sports betting and the way sports betting is just so prolific now. I'll just shut up there and just let you finish all those thoughts.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. Let me preface it by saying that I've never been in my life, legally or illegally, a sports gambler. It's just not something that I've ever partaken with the exception of, the first few times I went to Las Vegas, just for giggles. It was the off season. I'm going to put $10 on the Jets to win the Super Bowl. Just so I had a ticket in my hand that said, well, what would happen if the Jets actually won?
You'd be a millionaire.
I'd be a millionaire, yeah.
And Peter, I love you for even saying it out loud, but on the other hand, that's $10 that you just could have spent on a hot dog.
Yeah.
you would have been better off. Just saying.
Yeah, it was the adrenaline rush of doing it. But I've never been much. I don't play fantasy, so I have to put that out there. Where it's parts of it is uncomfortable for me because as a talk show host, it's something you have to cover now. It used to be something that I could avoid as someone who was not into it, but there's no getting around it now. Even on the podcast that I host, Sports Bash, I've had sports gambling people on the show because you have to. I mean, it's part of the audience. You have to cater to your audience. So I have had people from the sports gambling space on my show. I'm not surprised it has gotten this big because you just knew, just from years and years of people doing it illegally, eventually there was going to be a time where it was going to become legal. The problem you have now is, even though it's legal, there's still restrictions, and you're still getting players who are caught doing it in the locker room on their phones. That's where you have the problem by making it legal. And really, all the sports leagues and the teams are all in bed with the gambling operations now. You can't watch a game without seeing something for DraftKings or anything like that. So I'm not surprised how big it got. I am surprised how long it took for it to be legal, because there was so much money for the sports leagues and the states to make on it, that I'm surprised it took so long. And I think a lot of the people in the gambling space would agree with that. But it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and it's just a part of society now.
Are you surprised? Because that revenue that's coming in now, right? You brought it up accurately, has made the value of these teams, and we can look at almost any sport and go, that number is just nuts. But the value of these teams is just on another level. Did you ever foresee that happening? Did you ever think it could happen?
I always, growing up, obviously, and then becoming someone in the media, like, you always knew that it was, the Dallas Cowboys and the Yankees and the Lakers, the teams that historically did well and had championship pedigrees, and they owned, they owned their own regional sports network. They would operate their stadium. Like, those are the franchises that you always knew they would be worth the most money. And to say that a team now could be worth $1 billion or more in some cases, I think if the Dallas Cowboys were on the market, they'd go for more than $1 billion. I'm sure the Yankees would as well. But some of these teams in smaller markets, like in the NBA, like I'm sure if the Oklahoma City Thunder were were on the open market to be sold, they'd be going for close to $1 billion, I would think, just because they sell out every game. They probably own their own TV network. So no, I'm not surprised. I think the numbers are staggering, but when you think about the business and how much money is being shelled out for TV deals and things like that, I don't think it's a surprise. I think it's a surprise more in some of the smaller markets that it's gotten that big as far as the numbers. But certainly here in New York, I mean, you wouldn't be shocked if you saw the numbers that what the Yankees or the Mets would be sold for if they were on the open market now.
But Peter, I agree with everything you said. And just getting back to the question of the sports betting and how the leagues have embraced it, and I understand why they've embraced it, they're making a fortune. What makes me nervous is for the young viewer who literally can make a bet. I think I've never gone on a website, but I listen to the commercials. It sounds to me like they could bet on every free throw if they wanted to in real time. So how, I mean, the hypocrisy of not having Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame to where we are now, where you literally are possibly creating an entire generation of gambling addicts. I just think of at some point there's going to be blowback for these leagues that somehow I think it's almost a little bit it's going a little bit too far in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's to me at times it's uncomfortable. I'll take you back to the pandemic. When they came out of the pandemic, they were still in the pandemic. When the NHL came back to play in the bubble, and they had teams were playing in Toronto and teams were playing in Edmonton. The Islanders made that run to the semifinals, and that was one of the good things that came out of that pandemic was there was a lot of bonding time for me and my family watching all those Islander games. Some of them were in the afternoon during the week, but it was right around that time that like the gambling companies really started to advertise very heavily on the telecast. And I remember sitting down, the Islanders were playing an afternoon game in the bubble, and my younger son, Jared, said to me, "Why do we have to sit through all this like gambling stuff? Okay, I just want to watch the game." And there would be a whistle in the game, and the screens one screen would go small, and then the ad would come up for 15 seconds. It's not too late to put a bet down on this game. Go to whatever. And it was uncomfortable for me. It was uncomfortable for my kids who, they don't know from this because mom and dad don't do it. So I was always concerned that we needed to have a conversation with our kids about it. And we did, and we're very, very confident that it's not going to be a problem. They do play fantasy, but they play free fantasy sports. They'll go to the ESPN website or something like that, and they're always talking to me about their fantasy teams. I'm like, how much is it costing you? Nothing. Just making sure that that's the case. Look, when they get older and they want to do something on their own, when they're an adult, I think they have a pretty good head on their shoulders, so I'm confident they'll be okay. But I am concerned because I do hear from them about friends of theirs who are into this and spend money on their phones doing the sports gambling. I think it's dangerous. And I would say it's a conversation every parent has to have with their child, whether they're 5 years old or 15 years old or 20 years old. I think they have to have that conversation. And also, Michael, it depends on the upbringing they have in their house. If they're in a house that they have parents that are gamblers, chances are they're going to be gamblers too. So not to say that my wife and I don't, take a ride out to Jake's 58 once in a while to spend an hour. I think that's healthy. I think that's fine. But I think it's important for kids to learn about gambling at a young age so that if they are around it, then they know that they can control it themselves.
I agree.
Pete, I think the issue for us as financial advisors, and I've literally witnessed this with my own two eyes, they'll have the sports betting app on their phone and they hit a bet and then they swipe over to a financial app that allows them to buy or sell stocks or cryptocurrencies on their phone. And they're literally flipping back and forth between the betting site for sports and I hate to call it the betting site, sorry, for investing or speculating. And there's almost no difference between the two for these young people.
Yeah, it's dangerous. It really is. I mean, and to that point, people will say to me, "Oh, what did you do on Sunday? And I'm like, I sat at home, watched the Jet game. Oh, you don't have like the red zone? You're not watching the other games? And I'm like, no, I'm watching the Jets. I'm not watching any one game. I'm watching my phone and I'm watching the red zone because I got my fantasy team and I need to know what's going on in this game. And I'm like, that's not how I grew up learning how to watch sports. I want to watch the game that I'm fixated on. I don't care about the other games. And I think that's the problem now too, because the way to watch all these games is so easy now. Now you can get the red zone, you can get the Sunday ticket and watch every single game you want to. And that allows people like, well, listen, if I can watch that game, I'm going to bet on that game. It used to just be you could have the Jets or the Giants here in New York, or if you lived in Miami, you got the Dolphin game on TV. Now anybody can watch any game, and they're going to do it, especially if they have action on the game. So it's you're right. When you have it at your fingertips and you can go back and forth from one app to another, I think it creates a monster. Again, I'm pretty sure my wife and I have our kids under control on it, but I don't know if I could speak the same for other people. I just think it's dangerous, and I think education is extremely important. Whether you're in the financial world or whatever world you're in, it's something that's got to be educated to the young kids. I'm surprised they don't talk about it in school as much. The teachers do.
I agree with you. So that's a great segue. You've done this nicely for me. You should pursue a career in radio. I appreciate the segue you just gave me. Let's talk about let's talk about college. Let's talk about the NIL, name, image, and likeness. I didn't realize until I was watching the college playoffs this past year that some of these college athletes literally are paid millions of dollars now, millions. So, and I know your son is a college athlete. He plays football. What is that all about? What's the NIL all about? And I mean, I personally think paying these young athletes is probably fair. The institutions make a ton, but could you educate our listeners on what the NIL is all about?
Well, I think before you talk about the NIL, you have to go backwards a step just to kind of recap where we were in college sports years ago. Because there was a time where if you were a college athlete, legally you didn't get paid any money. I mean, there's always been the talks and the stories about how boosters would pay kids under the table to go to a certain university. So let's take that out of the equation for a minute. Let's go on the surface that everything is on the up and up and legal. You are a college football player, you get recruited to go to school A, and you're there. And back in the day, you were locked in there for 4 years. The coaches could always leave. The coaches always broke their contracts, but the players could never leave. The players could never get a job while they were in school. They couldn't even go to the school store and get a job. They were on a scholarship. They were on a free ride. That was their thing. Now, if they wanted to transfer to another school, they could do it, but they'd have to miss a year. You want to go from school A to school B, you can go to school B, you can go to class, but you can't play football at school B for another year. You've got to take a year off, unless there were mitigating circumstances, whatever. So I always felt like the student athletes got the short end of the stick, even though they were getting a free ride for college. College students, I was a college student. I mean, everybody was a college student for the most part. You need some money when you're in school. You want to be able to take your girlfriend out for dinner, and you can't do it illegally. You can't have the coach do it for you because that's an illegal, financial thing. So I always felt like the players should have gotten a stipend. And I think if the players gotten a stipend somewhere along the way, whether it's $100 a week, whatever it might be, I don't think we ever would have gotten to the point where we are right now. What we did was we went from zero to 60 in less than a second, where now these players are getting paid, as you mentioned, millions of dollars to go to a school, and then they're essentially a free agent after every year. So you could literally be a student athlete going to school now and go to 4 schools in 4 years. Or if you have that more eligibility, you can go to 5 schools in 5 years. St. John's basketball last year, Mike, win the Big East championship, go into the NCAA tournament. From that team that went to the NCAA tournament last year, only 4 players came back this year. Now,
Mhm.
some was because of graduation, but a lot was because Rick Pitino went out and got better players. He went out and offered money to bring that guy in from that school, from Duke or from North Carolina. So it's become this, wild, wild west where players aren't committed to one school for 4 years. It just doesn't work out that way anymore. And it's to me, it's diminished the product of college sports. I think, listen, you want to move once in your 4 years. If you're not happy with where you are, you move once. Yeah,
Or if there's a triggering event, right? Your coach leaves, then I think it should open the door for
right.
the average
Well,
athlete.
but here's the other thing too: is if you committed to go to a school, I'll take football for example, because that's the one I'm closest to. Because as Michael said, my son plays college football. You commit yourself to a school, and you don't get to play right off the bat, and then the next year comes, and you don't get to play. Well, you're going to get sick of not playing. I know you're there for college, but you're going to get sick of not playing. So you're going to try to transfer it to another school. Now you could do it easily. Back in the day, you couldn't. You were basically a prisoner of the college that you had committed to. Unless there was a mitigating circumstance where they would let you out of your scholarship, you were stuck there for 4 years, whether you got on the field or not. Now, you go to a school for a year, you don't get on the field, and you don't think you're getting on the field the next year, you go in the transfer portal, and you find another place to go. And that's just the way it is right now. But again, you should be able to, just on basis of your own merit, be able to pick one time in your 4 years to switch to another school. Now, other stuff does come up. I get it. Coach leaves. Maybe the school is brought up on some kind of charges or whatever. That lets you leave as well. But the going to 4 schools in 4 years is just something that's absolutely crazy. But the money is there. That's what it is. You're going to get more money to go to that school. You're going to go to that school, and there's nothing holding you to that school. So the year after, you can switch to another one. We were trying to explain to my mother, because my son is actually in the transfer portal right now, mitigating circumstances where he was last year. And my mother's on, why is he transferring? I'm like, well, because he's looking for a better situation. Oh, but years ago, you went to school for 4 years. Well, Mom, I wasn't an athlete. That's number one. Number two, it just wasn't easy to move back then. So it's something new. I don't like it. I don't like being able to go from school to school to school to school. I think that this really has diminished college sports, but it has become a business. It's not even college athletics anymore. It's a minor league to the professionals. That's really what it's become.
AP, just because I don't want to run out of time without asking the question, so I'm going to just change it up a little bit. One of my favorite teams was the '86 Mets, and you were in the locker room. You were a lot of the broadcasters, I want to go, knew what was going on behind the scenes, and it just seemed like in those days, even though you guys knew what was going on, you kind of kept it hush hush. That doesn't seem like that happens anymore. Was there kind of an unwritten rule back in those days, and has that rule changed?
Well, if you're going back to '86, I was in college at Buffalo State, Yankee fan rooting for the Mets to beat the Red Sox in the World Series. So I don't go back that far. But yeah, it's different now with the information. It used to be back in the day where something happened and it was put in the newspaper and you don't get to see it until the next day. Then came
If you got to see it at all.
If you got to see it at all. And look, it's different now because now you got the beat writers for the newspapers, you've got sports radio people that are going to games, you've got national people, you got bloggers. There's so many more people out there, and it leads to so many more opportunities to connect with players and agents and get sources. But I remember there was a time where if something happened when you were at the game, people didn't find out about it until they read the newspaper the next day. Now, something happens, the writer puts it out on Twitter, and all of a sudden the whole world knows about it. So the Yankees make a trade, you find out about it in 2 seconds. So back in the day, it wasn't so much that the writers and the reporters held on to it. They had it. They just didn't have a way of getting it out there. Not until sports talk radio started, if they happened to be connected with a sports radio station. But it's not a question of whether they had it or not. I'm sure people who covered the '61 Yankees had stuff on players and coaches, and they just you didn't get the information until the next day, or maybe days down the road when you finally picked up a newspaper. It's a completely different ball of wax now because it's so much easier to transmit stuff that happens. I'll cover Islanders practice, one morning, and you watch the players come on the ice, and you'll see he hasn't really missed a practice for any particular reason, just for rest. Matthew Schaefer's not practicing this morning. He's not on the ice. So you tweet it, and I got 13,000 followers on Twitter that are now in a panic because Matthew Schaefer didn't practice. And you find out after practice, it was just a maintenance day for him. They were giving him a day off to relax. But by not seeing him on the ice, that was a story. Matthew Schaefer's not practicing. Why? Everyone wants to know why. Well, we won't find out till we talk to Patrick Waugh after practice. That would never happen 30 years ago because there was no Twitter. There was no way to dissect that information and disseminate it anywhere. We now, because of social media, live in a completely different world when it comes to sports reporting because you are reporting it as it happens, as opposed to years ago when you had to wait till the next day to find out about it.
Peter, and that's a great answer because the truth is, 30 years ago that would not have been a story because you would have found out it was a maintenance day for him, and there would have been nothing to report. Right. So, Peter, we have 4 minutes before we have to go, and I know you got a new gig called the Sports Bash. It's a podcast like we do. So, tell us about the Sports Bash and how do our listeners gain access to it? When is it on? Is it live like we are? So talk about that for a little bit.
Sure. We launched podcast August of 2023 as a weekly radio show on a small Long Island station, LI News Radio. October of 24, we moved it to Governor's Comedy Club, their podcast channel. And we do it live on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern time. It's a 1-hour show that I host, and we get some really good guests on the program, and we take phone calls. And after the show is over live, it's saved, so you can go back and, like my mother, if she's out with her friends, I couldn't watch the show today, I'll watch it later. So, but it's out there on YouTube and Facebook on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I'm also now working for the American Soccer Club New York, which is a professional team that plays here on Long Island. I'm their communications coordinator. I also do some sales and announcing for them as well. So that's been a really cool addition to my portfolio, so to speak. So between Sports Bash and the soccer team and some of the other fill-in gigs that I do, I stay pretty busy nowadays.
Dom, you want to get in the last word?
Sure. Okay. Basically, and especially on weekends when we're watching conflict in the world and unfortunately innocent people passing away, sometimes I have the ability to look at sports and hear guys like you, Pete, kind of just even if it distracts us for a minute and let's just let the brain calm down for a minute. So thanks for helping us maybe relax once in a blue moon and giving us a little insight into what's going on in the sports world. I'm a big fan, listener of Fan. So I've heard you for years. And again, thanks for the distraction.
Sports is a great distraction. It was in 1980 when we were going through a real bad time in our country and the U.S. Olympic hockey team won. It was a great distraction in 2020, 2021 during the pandemic when sports at least helped us get back to life a little bit. And just a couple of weeks ago with both Olympic hockey teams winning, there's never been so much divide in our country. At least that brought the country together for a couple of weeks. So it is nice to have sports as a nice distraction for what's going on in the world.
I third that emotion, but Dom, I do have to correct one thing. You use the word relaxing and the New York Jets in the same breath.
Oh, listen. So again, I'm sensitive to the amount of time, but there is something mentally unhealthy of being a Jet fan for as long as I have been. But maybe the relaxing part is what I do for a living. I'm not sure. But last one, Pete, really quick. We have any hope? Do we have any hope in the Jet world next season?
Don't count on it. Let's see who our quarterback is going to be.
And we'll leave it at that.
I'll leave to you two Jet fans to figure that out. Peter.
Yeah, I don't think you have a quarterback either, Mike. So I wouldn't be bragging right now.
I'm just saying. So listen, Peter, thank you for, as Dominic said, bringing a breath of fresh air on a busy night and heavy stuff we had to cover. So it was perfect timing, and we appreciate you making the time for us tonight.
My pleasure. It was wonderful anytime, and thanks again.
Thank you, Pete. Have a great night.
Have a good night, everybody.